Remember me? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number 217, recorded live on a beautiful, crisp autumn evening, October 6th, 2014. I am your host and new YouTube broadcaster, Todd Klindt. And I'm doing this thing on YouTube tonight for the very first time. We'll talk about that in the production notes here in a minute, but pretty crazy stuff. Before I get excited about YouTube and all that, got to get excited about Rackspace and the folks at Rackspace.com. So you can go to Rackspace.com to find out what we've got. We've been kind of showing off this new thing, and you can go out there. We now have virtualization all on the Microsoft stack if you want it. So we do, the OpenStack stuff, we do VMware, and now we also do everything on Hyper-V and System Center. So you can go to www.rackspace.com/Microsoft and find out all about that. That's some good stuff out there. Something that Shane and I have been working on in our spare time, and we'd like to share it with you. So if you want to get everything on that cool Microsoft technology, you want to go to www.rackspace.com/Microsoft. All right. So for production notes, the big news is obviously the last couple of weeks, Shane has taken over for me, and we'll talk about that in the topics, oddly enough. And he did not a terrible job. I've seen him do worse. I've been on stage with him when he's done worse. But that wasn't bad. But tonight we're doing something brand new, something we've never done. And it's kind of an exciting thing. It seems to be working out pretty well. I'm broadcasting this on YouTube. So when we started this whole mess out 5 years ago, I used a company called StickCam, and they worked pretty well for me. Good free service. All the famous internet models used it, so it must be good. And I fit right in with those guys. And then I went to the New Media Expo a couple of years ago and saw the Ustream booth, and they had some cool stuff there. So I thought, I'll try Ustream out. Switched over to Ustream. The next month, StickCam went bankrupt. So now, as far as I know, Ustream is doing great. They have no problems. But for the last, we'll call it 6 months to a year, I've been thinking about doing this on YouTube, because Ustream's got commercials, which I don't begrudge them making a living. That's all good. I got no problem with that. But it seemed to be a problem sometimes for the viewers. They'd ask questions, I'd answer them, and then a commercial would come up. And also, YouTube is kind of a big deal on the internet. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but that's kind of where everybody goes. And I started publishing the videos to YouTube a couple of years ago, and it just seemed like the natural thing to do is to broadcast live on YouTube. So I've been playing with that for a year, and I tested it a couple of times and just couldn't quite get the way I wanted. And I kind of feared change. I get scared sometimes, but finally broke down this week and did it. So Shane and I tested this out last week. We brought Lori in to kind of get things working, and I think we got a workable product here. So I thought I would spend a couple of minutes talking about kind of how I've got this whole thing set up. So I am actually doing this through Google Hangouts. And if you do a Google Hangout, you can do a Google Hangout on air. And when you do that, it streams automatically through your YouTube channel. So you can go to youtube.com/Todd Klindt Netcast. And during the week, you'll see all the videos that I put up there. But if you go on Monday nights, 8:30 Central, you will, the top video up there will be this live stream. And that is, again, coming through a Google Plus Hangout. So you can also find it on Google Plus. I'm not sure if I'm going to really broadcast that link much, because I don't know that I'm going to do anything with that. But you can go to YouTube. You can watch it live. So anything that can watch YouTube can watch it live. You don't need a special client or to download anything. And so that gives me a couple of things. Number one, I used to have to record and stream this separately. So I had 2 webcams set up and all that, 2 different things running. And earlier this year, the software that I used to record would kind of poop out on me sometimes. And that was a function of this whole using different things. And these webcams take a tremendous amount of USB bandwidth. And so the system was always kind of fighting with that. So now that I'm doing this with YouTube, another feature of this is it records the video as it streams it. So when I get done with this video, I'll stop the broadcast. It'll kind of button it up on the YouTube side. I'll be able to go in as the channel owner and download that video. And then that's what I'll use. I'll bring that into Camtasia, which is always what I've used to edit this thing. I'll bring that MP4 file into Camtasia, put my lower thirds on, put my bumper music in, edit, stuff out and all that, and then upload it back to YouTube with all the finish and all that on it. So I don't have to worry, the streaming and the recording is all through this software, all through one camera, all through one mic. My CPU over here, I've got Task Manager up. It hasn't even busted 40% yet. Normally on a night like this, it'd be up 80, 85%, and it's not doing too bad. So that's all good. It's going to let me record and stream with one. Another great benefit, and this is something I've been wanting to do for 5+ years now, besides get a chair that doesn't squeak, is I wanted to be able to bring guests in. I wanted to get other people to come in. That's one of the things you can do with this Google Hangouts, as I can invite other people in, and they'll be Google hanging out on their end, and I'll be Google hanging out on my end, and it'll switch them all back and forth, and we'll be able to interview people, things like that, and so that's another great thing that I wanted, the ability to bring in guests, and that'll be great. So couple of things, couple of downsides, couple of weird things about this is, number one, the lag seems to be a little rough on this. With Ustream, we enjoyed probably 10 to 20 seconds worth of lag between when I would say something and when you guys would see it. And it looks like now that's a little closer to 45 seconds to a minute, maybe, something like that. So that's kind of rough lag. It makes the chat room tough. The recording folks, you're probably not going to notice it so much, but the chat room folks, they're used to heckling me in real time, and now there's going to be a little bit of lag on that. So that's kind of one thing. Another potential downside is that when this video is live, people will be able to make comments on it in YouTube, kind of carry on. We've got the chat room going, but people will be able to do things live in there. But one of the things that I'm going to do is, after this video is done, after I'm done recording tonight, I'm going to download that video and I'm going to delete it. So they're going to lose all those comments. So that's a bad thing, and I don't know any way around that. Honestly, I'm not too broken up about that. But just know that if you leave any comments, they're probably going to get lost when I pull this video down. And another thing that I just noticed, it looks like my internet connection hiccuped. And golly, I can't wait to see how this recording looks, because I'm not recording it local now. I'm only recording it out to YouTube. So I'll be curious how this is going to work for everybody. So, but overall, I think this is a good thing. We're going to have a couple of weeks of growing pains, but then after that, I expect to be bringing people in, having fun, interviewing folks. It should be a good deal. So the folks in the chat room helped me troubleshoot some stuff beforehand, and I appreciate all that. But let's keep going. All right. So now on to topics. So I've been gone for a couple of weeks, and I've been all over the world, all over the country, all over the world, and I got a bunch of things going on. The first thing that I did was, we had SPTechCon a couple of weeks ago, and a bunch of stuff came from that, and it has come out on that. So first, while I was there, I was on a panel with Andrew Connell, and he recorded that for his own podcast. He's got a podcast with oh my goodness, I'm blanking on his name. Chris Johnson do their own podcast called the Microsoft Cloud Show. You can find out about them at microsoftcloudshow.com. And we did a panel that AC moderated, and then he kind of brought a few of us together, and we kind of hashed over the same stuff. So the whole idea of the panel was Office 365 or on-prem SharePoint, kind of where are you headed, what's the future look like? And that is episode 47 for those guys. So I will put that out there, and I'll have a link on here. about that. But that was a lot of fun, and there's a bunch of buddies. I mean, every one of these like SPTechCons and SharePoint conferences and all that is like a high school reunion. It's all my buddies, but it was Ben Curry and Jeff Ferosky and I think Reuven was there. I don't know. It was all a good time. But you can hear that whole thing in episode 47. So another great thing that those guys did, and I've known AC and CJ for 8-10 years, something like that. I mean, just forever. We've been friends forever. And so, we get along, we hang out, that kind of stuff. Those guys, a couple of episodes before the one that, the episode 47 that we were on, they made a list of kind of some of their favorite resources on the web. Blog resources, video, audio resources, things like that. They did not include me. Now, in their defense, they're developers. I'm very anti-developer. It was no big deal. But when I saw AC out there, I was getting ready to make this change to YouTube and all that kind of stuff. And I said, hey, we should get together sometime and just chat about podcasting, because I've been doing this for a long time and I'm afraid I might be like, stuck in my ways. They just started, so they kind of have some new ideas. And so I'm like, hey, we should talk about this podcasting thing sometime and just compare notes and maybe, cross promote, that kind of stuff. And AC's like, oh man, it just occurred to me, we didn't put your podcast on our list. I'm like, no big deal. That's not why I mentioned it. It's all good. But in episode 47, he and CJ spend a couple of minutes apologizing to me, and it's not necessary, but I appreciate their mentioning that. So they did give me a shout out on that, and that was damn nice of them. You can also follow them on Twitter at MS Cloud Show, and the panel that AC moderated that kind of turned into the episode 47 of the Cloud Show is on YouTube. And so I'll put the link to that in the notes below. It's probably across the bottom here, and then also out there. But that was a good time. The SPTechCons are always a good time, and I was very happy with Andrew and Chris giving me a shout out like that. They didn't have to do that, but there's 4 or 5 of us that do these SharePoint podcasts. You'll probably see us start talking about each other a little bit, kind of to get the word out. There's a few people that listen to this that don't know about their show and vice versa. And so this is kind of a good way. So I'll probably bring them on at some point, just to kind of talk about stuff. And that's how we'll get this thing going. All right. But thanks to those guys for that. So that was 3 weeks ago. I was at SPTechCon and all that went on. 2 weeks ago, thanks to my man Jared Shockley, who is not here right now. He was in the chat room before. He got me hooked up with the Tech Ed Roundtable, folks. And now, I don't know if you noticed, like in July, kind of a big wig at Microsoft, Julia White, she mentioned that Microsoft in May, so May 4th through the 8th of 2015, Microsoft is taking all of their big IT Pro conferences. We're talking Tech Ed, SharePoint Conference, Project Server Conference, Link Conference, and the Microsoft Exchange Conference, or MEC, as it's known to his friends. They're taking all those conferences and they're pushing them all together and making one super huge, big conference. And it's, again, May 4th through the 8th, 2015 in Chicago. Now, this is a vast undertaking, as you can imagine. And they started this last year. They have these Tech Ed roundtables, and they bring some other folks in, some non-Microsoft folks, some speakers, some attendees, vendors, all that kind of stuff, a little flavor of everybody. And they ask them for their opinion on stuff. And I was invited to that because of Jared, so I appreciate that. So for 2 days, I was in Chicago with those guys getting that looked at. So I put a blog post out there on it. You can go to toddklindt.com/msbigconf, and that will take you to the blog post. I'm kind of excited. So when I saw this thing in July, I was a little skeptical. I think having 2 events is better, and that might just be me being greedy, because that was 2 events I got to go to, which was kind of cool. But also the size of both of those events is huge. I mean, Tech Ed was always around 10,000 people. SharePoint Conference was always like 10 to 12,000 people. So the idea of taking those 2 and adding 3 more was just insane. So So I kind of went in with that in mind. I was a little nervous, but they did a good job of demonstrating that they were on it, I guess. So obviously we don't know how well it's going to work yet because we haven't gone there. But most everything that any of us thought of, they had at least thought of. They might not have the solution for it. That might have been one of the things that they were going to ask us about, but they were on it. Lou in the chat room is asking, have they given a price? They haven't published a price yet that I've seen. So the first day we were there, we toured the conference center. It's McCormick Place in Chicago, just outside of downtown there. The place is massive. So it's 4 big conference buildings. And I believe they said it was like 7.5 million feet of conference center, just crazy space. They showed us 2 of the exhibit halls. One of them was 800,000 square feet, and the other one is 600,000 square feet. It is just massive, just on a huge scale. They will obviously have room for everything in the conference center and have room left over. But just being able to get everywhere and all that, we'll see how that works. Now, one of the things that I'm worried about a little bit is lodging. So one of the things that they mentioned, that because we were talking about, whether it should be in one place or whether it should move around the country, things like that. And we mentioned, there's probably not that many places in the US that you could have a conference this size. And they said, well, conference center wise, there's a few, but it's really not the conference center that's the limiting factor. It's the infrastructure. It's the hotel rooms, it's the transit and all that kind of stuff. So imagine that not only do we have to have 20,000 people in this conference room or in this conference center going to sessions and eating and all that kind of stuff, those 20,000 people got to sleep somewhere that night. And then those 20,000 people got to get from that place that they slept and get to the McCormick Center. And that's where things are really going to get tricky is that. So the McCormick place has one hotel that's attached to it, and it's a small one. It's like 1,200 rooms. So that thing's, I'm sure, bought already. So the other 20,000 of us, or 18,800 of us, are going to end up downtown. Now, downtown is like 2.5 miles away. It's not too far, 10-minute bus ride if you're the last guy on the bus. But all those people are going to shuffle back and forth. And it sounds like Doug Heminger, he lives in Chicago. Sounds like we're all going to shack up at his place. So thanks for that. So we toured the conference center, and it was great. So Jack Frew in the chat room brings up a good point. Chicago is great for people flying in because it is a United hub, an American hub, and Southwest and all that kind of stuff. So it's easy for those airlines to get to. It's also easy for folks outside of the US to get to also because a lot of the big international airlines stop off in Chicago. I fly Delta, so there's not a hub there, but I'm probably just going to drive. Chicago's like a 5-hour drive for me. And but it was all good. So I'm curious how they're going to move the 20,000 of us around, because I mean, just dropping 20,000 people in Chicago into any town is going to have an impact. But I left that week. So a couple of things. Number one, they spent a lot of time asking us for our opinion. They didn't spend a lot of time saying, here's how it's going to be, go forth and proselytize for us. They spent a lot of time saying, we know this is an issue. How do you think we could approach it? Or what are the top 3 things you think we should care about? And so that made me feel good that they really were soaking up our input. And the other thing is I think they might pull it off. So they're looking at about 20,000 people. I guess I mentioned that already, which is absolutely huge. Yeah, that's right. Naomi Moneypenny, she's in the chat room, and she was there also. So they said 72 hotels. Now they also said part of the problem with a big conference like this is keeping the groups together, keeping the SharePoint folks near the SharePoint folks and the Exchange folk, blah, blah, blah. And so part of what they're going to do with that is they're going to try to group the rooms together. So the SharePoint classes, breakouts will be in the same general area. They're going to try to group the vendors together. So where it makes sense, they're going to have the SharePoint vendors in the vendor room. It doesn't make sense for all of them, but for the ones it does, they're going to also going to try to maybe get the SharePoint attendees, in the same hotels, that kind of thing. So that should help. There is a dedicated train line that goes to McCormick, and so one of the local folks said that the Chicago Transit folks, I keep wanting to say Chicago Transit Authority, but I'm not sure if that's really what it's called. They're pretty good about lighting up extra trains to get people in and out of town. There's also a dedicated street for the buses. Now, that's still going to be a ton of buses, but there is a dedicated street that comes off that goes underneath McCormick and has room for that. So it'll be a good time. I do have one funny story to tell. While we were there the first afternoon, so the north building, the south building, and the Lakeview building or Lakeshore building are all attached, and then there's a west building across the lot there. So in the afternoon, they're like, hey, we're going to go across the lot. We're going to take a look at something else. So in the west building, there was another, I don't want to say conference, but like another expo going on. A really cool thing is a guy that travels a lot. It was cool. It was an expo where airports and cities woo airlines to bring flights in. I looked for Des Moines International, must have been off someplace. I didn't see it. But, like airports in the U.S. and overseas and all that have these booths set up talking about how great their city is and how many people go there, trying to get airlines to bring more flights there or bring flights there in general. So that was pretty cool as a guy. And these booths were amazing. They had your typical 10 by 10, but they also had huge ones. Chicago, as you can imagine, since it was in Chicago, and Chicago having two major airports, O'Hare and Midway, had a gigantic booth. It was like 20,000 square feet. It had a bar in it, like a bar with beer on tap and all that. Gigantic. And they had these two huge touchscreen displays. These things had to be 60, 70 inches of the two airports where you could zoom and look at the runways and move stuff around. You couldn't tilt, but you could zoom and move. It was pretty cool. And then a big flat thing. But what was even funner was the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, was there. And he knew we were going to be there. And so he came over to meet us. So the whole lot of us, there was probably, 20 so of us guests, and then another 20 so Microsoft folks that went over and met the mayor. So unbeknownst to me, I didn't know this at the time, but he was supposed to come over and meet us, but then he got busy and all that. So we went over there to the Chicago booth to meet him, and he's getting followed around, and there's the paparazzi and all that kind of stuff. And we're all standing in a group, and he comes by and he starts shaking our hands. And I was kind of off to the leading edge of our little pack of nerds there. And he kind of had it on autopilot. You could tell he'd been doing this all day. And he was just kind of, so he's shaking hands, good to meet you, thanks for coming, all that kind of stuff. And he gets to me, and he's like, sorry you had to come over here, thanks for coming over. And so without even thinking, this is one of those things that after it happened, I kind of like, oh my God, did that come out loud? He's like, sorry you had to make the trip over. I'm like, yeah, what's going on with that? Next time you come to us, we'll get you this time, you get us next time. And so I say this, and he keeps walking and shaking hands, and he gets like two people past me, and then it clicks in his head that I just smarted off to him, and he stops, and he kind of looks over his shoulder at me, and he kind of gives me a smirk, and he gives me the point, and then he keeps on walking. It was it was pretty funny. I don't think he gets a lot of that for better or for worse, but that was a good time. So got to meet the mayor. That was a good time. But anyway, I went into this whole thing pretty skeptical that they were going to pull it off. I would say that I will upgrade my my feeling to cautiously optimistic. I think they're gonna be able to pull it off. Now we'll see, and I hope I get a speaking spot or something like that. I'm looking forward to it, but I think they might pull it off. All right, so I've run horribly long here, but we'll keep going. So then last week, I was in Stockholm, Sweden for the SharePoint Exchange Forum, and I'm wearing my fancy speaker shirt here, and on the back, speaker. So that was a good time. This is like the 6th time I've been over to Stockholm. Jorn Huseman puts us on, good friend of mine, a tremendous host, always does a great job, takes care of the speakers, takes care of the attendees, but always puts on a great show. So this year, had another great time. We were at a little, I forget it, Piper Ska Musen. I forget, but it was a good time. I did sessions on my load testing with Visual Studio and Upgrade. The attendees are great. Met a few European listeners of the Netcast. I promised you guys I'll do one European time this month. I'm sticking to it. But had a great time. Great parties, all that kind of stuff. I should have dedicated more time to talk about that. But Hugh, Joran, thank you so much for inviting me. I hope I get to come back again next year. It was a blast. All right, so now on to some other stuff. I've got like 4 topics left. I've hit about a half an hour here. But we got some things that we need to talk about. So the big news last week was the release of the Windows 10 client and server. So Tuesday here in the US, I think it was the 29th of September, or Wednesday, I forget. Microsoft released kind of the new information on the new client and server operating systems. They're calling it Windows 10. They completely skipped Windows 9. The speculation on the internet is that was to protect any code that did a version match for Windows 9 star, looking for Windows 95 and Windows 98. But that came out, so you can get a hold of that. You can go to preview.windows.com and you can download the preview of the client for free. And they've got both x86 and x64 versions of that. And then also you can, if you're on MSDN, you can get the server versions of that. So Windows 10 Server, they're just calling it Windows Server on there. I don't know what they're going to call it. But so I downloaded both of those and played with both of those. It was good and bad. It was kind of anticlimactic because there've been a lot of leaks and all that about what was going to be in the next version of Windows, the client and the server, the return of the start menu and the virtual desktops and all that kind of stuff. And it was all there. So there was not a lot of, surprises. I'm like, oh yeah, there's that start menu. So I mean, again, it was exactly what we thought it was going to be, but it was good. So I've got Windows 10 installed on one laptop, and it seems to be working pretty well. I've got the Windows Server installed in a couple places, and it seems to be going pretty well. So I'll probably be talking about that a little bit more. One of the great things they're going to do with this is they're going to stream out the updates to the preview through Windows Update. So in the past, when they come out with a new build of Windows 8 or Windows 7 or whatever, you don't download it, reinstall, and now that's just all going to come out through Windows Update. So that's going to be good. I'm looking forward to that. But again, the client is available at preview.windows.com. The server is available on MSDN. Naomi Moneypenny mentioned one thing that I didn't talk about in Chicago. I have a near crippling fear of heights, though I've been working on it lately. I think it's gotten better. And one of the Microsoft parties, we went up to the top of the John Hancock building and did a thing called Tilt. So you're 1,000 feet up, 90 some floors. I forget exactly how many it is, but they've got this thing where you can lean against the glass. So the window, you're looking out, and I think I've got pictures in my blog post of it. I don't remember. Oh, I didn't post any pictures of that. But you lean against the glass and you can see forever, and then they tilt the window. So it goes 10 degrees, 20 degrees, and they say it's 30 degrees, but I swear to God, it was like that. And so you end up leaning against the glass and looking down 1,000 feet on the street. It was, so you got these little bars, and I was maybe cheating a little bit. I was holding myself up a little bit. A great view, beautiful. And when we went there, it was late, so it was lights and all that. It was a good time. Terrifying, but I didn't die, so that's great. So that was all good. And Chris Mainland mentions that you can copy and paste in the command prompt now using Control-C and Control-V. That would be exciting, except who uses the command prompt anymore? Everybody's PowerShell now. Man, I couldn't get excited about that. It's all PowerShell these days. It's all ball bearings and plastics and PowerShell, all of it. All right, so on the heels of that, if you install the Windows 10 client, you probably need the remote server administration tools, or RSAT. And so I've got a link here for the RSAT tools, and you'll need those if you're going to have a Windows 10 client, but then administrating other servers and that kind of stuff. So I saw that, put that out there. Right. So, and I'll probably spend more time. You're probably going to hear more about that in coming weeks as I play with it more. And it seems pretty stable so far. I'm pretty happy with it on the couple machines I've got it on. Seems good. Okay, so this is something I don't know if I would necessarily recommend this, but I follow the Hey Scripting Guy blog post, and they had one here over the weekend that was how to change the get help commandlet to always show examples. So I've talked about in the past, whenever I'm trying to do something new and amazing in PowerShell, my workflow is usually, get command with different strings, trying to figure out the commandlet that does what I want, and then help that commandlet name to see the description to see if it does what I want, and then up arrow, space, -E, tab to give me examples of that commandlet. That's normally how it's usually three steps: get command, help, and then help -examples. So this Hey Scripting Guy blog post talks about how you can change an environment parameter and put default parameters in specific commandlets. So you can hard code -examples into get help so that it always gives you that. I used it a couple times. Honestly, I kind of like that whole where I see the usage in that first. So I didn't like it, but that's out there for those of you that want to do that. And of course, there's a million other things that you can do with that same thing. But I liked how you could use that. Another great PowerShell resource is from a friend of mine, Jeffrey Hicks. He has put out the PowerShell Hyper-V Cookbook, and it is a free book. Jeff Hicks writes some great stuff. I can't believe he's giving this away for free, but this is a free book on using PowerShell with Hyper-V. This is, like I talked about earlier in the show, Rackspace is getting into the whole Hyper-V and System Center thing, and of course you can't do any of that without just loads and loads of delicious gooey PowerShell in the background. And this is a great jumpstart if you're looking at doing Hyper-V, looking at doing System Center, and want to get up to speed on how to do that efficiently and cooler than with the UI. Jeff's book on PowerShell Hyper-V Cookbook is a great one. And again, it's free. So go ahead and download that. Give him a man some link love. Download that. Make him feel good about all the hard work he put into that. All right. And finally, I don't have this completely fleshed out. I was hoping to have a blog post about this before I talked about it, but I don't. It's important enough that I don't want to wait for the blog post. This shouldn't go out another week. The too long didn't read version is do not let Windows updates install automatically on your SharePoint servers. That's what this next section is going to be about. So this happened to a couple of servers that I'm running, and I've seen some other stuff. Microsoft has snuck in some public updates for SharePoint. In September specifically, they did it, 2 of them. And one of the servers in a SharePoint farm had the Windows update set to automatically install. The rest had it set to automatically download. And it installed this SharePoint patch in the background, unbeknownst to me or any of the people that run the system. And then a bunch of stuff broke because then the farm knew that one server had some updates on it and the rest didn't, and it wasn't obvious where those came from. And putting the September patch on didn't exactly button it up the way that those patches did. So be very, very careful. Every SharePoint server that you have should be set to download patches but not install them. And then you should have a test environment where you probably also set it to the same thing. But every Patch Tuesday when patches come out, you jump over there, you install all those patches, and you see what happens. And see if there is a SharePoint one there and see if you want to leave that out or whatever. But I know we've talked about it before, but it jumped up a couple of weeks ago and nabbed a SharePoint farm. And so I wanted to mention it again. And I'll have a blog post on that. John White's in the chat room. I'm going to steal one of his screenshots. He tweeted me about it, and so I'm going to steal his screenshot. All right, folks. On to the shameless self-promotion. There isn't any. My conference season is over for a while. I don't have anything to talk about. So you guys have you guys got it easy here for a bit. But I do kind of want to wrap it up. I've been going here for 40 minutes or so. It sounds like for the most part, the YouTube thing's working pretty well. I will tell you my chat room connection has dropped 5 or 6 times while this has gone on. And that makes me think, oh my God, my internet connection is dropping, which means my recording is dropping. But I've been asking the folks in the chat room and they said that it's all been going. They haven't seen any hiccups, so that's good. On the other hand, there are a few folks that are having problems streaming it, so we're going to have to see what's going on with that. So we'll keep working on this. But let me know what you think about doing this on YouTube and with Google Hangouts and all that that business. I'm trying to make this better. That's one of the things that I've always wanted to do with this Netcast is whatever suggestions you guys have, short of just stopping, that will make this better, I want to do. That's how we got on YouTube. That's how we got the audio fixed. Those kind of things. So if you got suggestions on how we can make it better, give me a shout. I appreciate it. So I think I'm going to sign off for tonight. That is all good. Chat room, stick around. I'm going to keep the stream going, and we'll talk about some of this stuff. But thanks, everybody. The chat room, you've been very helpful. I'm curious to hear your feedback. So, well, thanks, everybody, and good night. See you next week.